All right, welcome everybody to the second session of DAO Spring. Today's session is about going from 0 to 1. So we'll start with a short with Rene and Chris Carella on the same topic. And then the final thing today will be the second part of the DAO Canvas workshop, where we have Daniel Ospina helping people answering questions around filling out the DAO Canvas and answering the remaining questions that they maybe didn't get to. Starting a DAO. Don't want to run out of battery. All right. So let me share my screen and get. All right. First thing that I want to say, which is kind of against the whole DAO Spring, is don't start a DAO. So this comes as a bit of a surprise to a lot of people, probably, except for the people who already started the DAO. Like, you don't need to start an actual DAO framework. You don't need voting. You don't need any of that fancy stuff to start doing what you're doing. And in fact, if you do start implementing all of that right away, it's only going to slow you down and in general make things harder. So I always recommend people who want to start a DAO, don't start by starting a DAO. Like, start building a project and then you can start a DAO later on. And so, yeah, this playbook is by no means definitive. It's only based on what worked for me. And then one thing that I always like to mention is what a wise man called Rafa from Mirror said once, is that if you want to build a DAO, you can choose to start by either building a product first, which is what like startups used to do always, or you can start community first. But ultimately, you need to find both for your project to succeed. So you can start with finding a product market fit or the community market fit, but ultimately you will need both. And this playbook is more focused on starting with the community first. And it goes through different roles: the minimum viable meme, minimum viable community is the only mode, content distribution, sustainability, and DAOification. So yeah, you'll see. We can go to the next one. So this is a big issue. Like, some people who want to start a project or a product that requires having technical skills, but they aren't developers themselves. So this is what I did, and I highly not recommend that. So if you want to start a technical product, you should either be a developer or start with a committed co-founder, and yeah, that's how you get started. Or you build something that can be built with no code tools, so you can at least build an MVP before turning it into a DAO, or like finding actual developers to build a better version. But yeah, even for the tech builders, what I noticed is a lot of people go with this sort of if you build it, they will come mentality, and they abstain from promoting their projects, which is a big mistake, because then all the other shitty projects are promoting themselves, and you won't get any attention if you don't put actual effort into promoting it. And then on the other side, you have content producers who don't have this bias against promotion, but they can't really build anything themselves. So this is what I mentioned before. I mean, it's obvious, but yeah, I guess it's worth mentioning, because, as I said, like, I started a technical project without being a developer, and it was hard. And then community builders, so it's super important, one of the important skills in building a DAO. But the issue is that you can't really build anything yourself. Like, if you want something that's going to be sustainable, you're going to need some kind of a product. Like, it can be content, but it's still not just community building. So, like, yeah, the building a community is the most important thing if you want to build a DAO. Like, okay, yes, you need the content, you need a product, whatever, but you can't do anything without having a community. You won't be able to decentralize, and community really everything in this space. So they'll help you market the project. That's how you'll find the builders. That's how you'll find the consultants, people who will guide you forward, people who will give you feedback on what you're building to make sure you're building the right things, and they will be your early adopters. So yeah, it's super important for all of those things, but it's also super important because Web3 is a space where open source is everything. So almost everybody's building everything open source, and the projects can easily be forked, and people can like copycat your product, but they can't copy your community. So like a strong community is the only actual moat that you can build to make your project irreplaceable with another project. And yeah, so starting with the first step, so defining this minimum viable meme. So really clearly defining your idea, starting with a single page document where you write a single paragraph or two on each of these. So the problem you want to solve and why this problem should be solved. What's the minimum viable solution to this problem? What kind of people you're looking for to help you solve this problem, and then the long-term idea and the bigger picture of this problem. So after you write this single page, that's like a full page, then you need to condense this into a single sentence. So come up with your one-liner that really emphasizes what's the value proposition. So when somebody reads this, they like clearly understand what you're trying to do and what they can get out of it. And then after you do this, you need to start passing it on to people, asking them what's unclear about this document, what sucks, what they would like to see improved. Once you do that and you do another iteration of the document, you improve it, then it's time to publish it. You can do that through Substack or Paragraph, and include a link from the next step on the next slide. So starting with the DAO canvas, answering all the important questions, and really getting this laser focus on the MVP, so the minimum viable product of what you want to build. And I think this is an issue that a lot of DAOs face, because as you include more and more people, you have more and more ideas, and the DAO starts spreading thin, and you just try to do too many things. And a lot of DAOs fail by doing this, where they just like spread too thin, try to do too many things, and then fail at making an actual impact, and then slowly fizzle out. And yeah, I think this is like one of the most important mistakes to avoid. Like, choose one thing and really do this one thing well, and try to like do this thing really well, get people who like this thing that you did, and only then move on to the second thing or add a second thing. But don't start by doing multiple things, please. All right, and then to the next slide, which is not supposed to have this title. This thing that I already overemphasized a bit, maybe, even though it's hard to overemphasize. So starting a community, I recommend people to start with a Telegram group. Some people think about starting a Discord right away because it has all those extra fancy features, but it's hard to get people to be regulars in your Discord, whereas Telegram like has a single unified inbox. And yeah, believe me, it matters, because otherwise, if you start with a Discord and you make a bunch of channels, it will all feel very watered down, or a bit like a ghost town. So start with a Telegram group. Include the link to the Telegram group in the post that was supposed to be in the previous slide, but it's actually 2 slides back. And then include these links everywhere. So like share it in any piece of content that you produce, and with anybody who seems interested in the project that you're building. And then, yeah, this group that you start, you need to share all of your writing and ideas in the Telegram group. Ask for feedback on everything, get people to share their ideas for improving things, and like poll them, do polls on whatever you're unsure of. Even if it's something that you can decide on your own, it's still cool to poll people to like make the community feel included in deciding the next steps and all of that. Then actually building this community. So one thing is that like people call everything communities these days, and even I'm doing so here. So people make a token and then call token holders a community, even though they might not be a real community. And in general, the issue with communities is that like unless you know these people already for a long time, it generally takes like a year or two to build an actual community. So Keep that in mind. That yeah, it's gonna take a while, but that's fine. Like you get your first 30 members, and then once you do that, you feel okay. I have like a basic community or this minimum viable community. That's what the DAO canvas slide was originally called, and the minimum viable community. Then use something like Letters to find a time that works for everybody. Make sure to DM literally every single person in the Telegram group. Like you might think that posting a link is enough, but it's not. Like you need to personally reach out, and this really matters. Like not just to bring people, but to create this personal touch with members, and yeah, to talk to them, make them feel welcome. And then it's also very important to set a rhythm. So this can be once a week, once a month, once every 2 months, but there needs to be some kind of regular cadence to meeting and a regular cadence to sharing updates on what's happening with the project. So this makes it easy for people to keep up and know that the project is still alive, whereas you might be quietly working on something but forget to write updates or forget to organize community calls or whatever, and then people start thinking that the project doesn't exist anymore and they disengage. And then yeah, building communities is hard, so I highly recommend people to read more about this. There's a chapter on building healthy communities in the DAO playbook, and there's a great resource also called Rosy Land, which writes and compiles a lot of resources about the building communities. So that's super useful. So going back to like technical, non-technical, and as I said, like this is based on what worked for me, and I'm not non-technical, so I put some emphasis on content. And really, content is the best non-technical way to create content, to create value for your project and to market your project, and it also help you further develop the ideas around it and get feedback from other people. So you need to get your distribution channels up, start using Twitter, start using Lens, Varcaster. Maybe don't start all three at once. Like choose one to focus on, depending on your niche. If you're like super deep in Web3, then you might want to start with Varcaster, or if it's less Web3 focused, then maybe Lens or Twitter. Obviously, YouTube if you're producing videos, but most importantly, something like a Substack or Paragraph. Like if you will be producing post or like have a newsletter, that's really highly recommended because it's really the only way to build an audience without having a platform lock-in. So no matter what platform you build a newsletter on, you can always migrate it to another platform and do a lot of cool things. On like Paragraph, you can have people collect posts as NFTs or subscribe using crypto or credit card, or yeah, there's a ton of great features like having people refer other people and get paid. So yeah, all of this will help you grow an audience around your community. And then over time, this will be become bigger than your Telegram group. Whereas in your Telegram group, there will only be people who are like the hardcore community members, and maybe like 10%, but probably less people in the community will actually be active. So that's something to not get discouraged around. Like people think that they will manage to activate the whole community, but this is never the case. Like vast majority of the community are always lurkers. So that's something just to keep in mind. And then, yeah, as I said already, like regularly sharing updates and making it as clear and succinct as possible in both channels. So on Telegram, on in the newsletter, and Farcaster, Twitter, wherever else. And yeah, other than that, trying to distribute to other platforms once you get a hang of your main platform. So this can be subreddits, it can be even Facebook groups if there are Facebook groups that are relevant to your niche, or just sharing them one-on-one. But again, like don't overextend yourself. Start with one platform and take it from there. That help keep chilling and talking to people. So something that helped me a lot is like being a part of this community called Meta Cartel. Like when you're getting started, like it's really hard and lonely in the beginning. So it's good to have like your base community besides the community you're building, to have like a community where you go to like hang out with other founders and other people who can offer you support in other ways. So yeah, consider joining another community. That's something that we're doing here at DAO Spring. There's also like projects like RNDAO or Seed Club that are also like incubating projects. But yeah, those are more like actual incubators than communities. And then yeah, most important thing like in all of this, like with building a community, with building a product, whatever you're building, it's really important to be super obsessed with talking to your community members and users. uh, I've seen people, and I've done this myself, where you just like build and build and build and talk to the team and just build together, decide together, but you won't get anywhere if you're not building the things that your community wants and that your members want. So like no matter what you think is the best idea, uh, your actual users and community members know better. So you really should be like all the time obsessed with what they want to see build, and what they think about what you currently built and all of that. uh, One recommended read that I have is the mom test. So it talks about how most people will kind of not they don't do this intentionally, although your mom might. Is like when you ask people for feedback, they will often lie to you, and not like it won't be like what's the word I'm looking for, malignant, I don't know, doesn't matter. But people don't want to say something bad to you. They don't want to hurt your feelings, so they will say, oh yes, I love that, yes, that's great, that's a great product, that's awesome. But they might not actually mean that. And it's sometimes really hard to get people to like to get really honest feedback. And one of the best ways, if not the only real way to get people to give honest feedback, is by not asking them for feedback, and by asking them to actually commit to pay for something. So like on Substack you have pledges, which is not even like directly paying. They commit to paying in the future, so they can, yeah, they put a pledge in, and then sometime in the future you can turn this on as like paid subscriptions. So this is one of the things that's also recommended, like if you're going down the content path, to start gathering these pledges. And if not, also like uh, start trying to sell NFTs along what you're doing, and really get people to put their money where their mouth is, as they say. And because yeah, it's really hard to get to know whether what you're building is super useful until people are actually paying or donating for it. And then yeah, so like since you're building a DAO, assuming you won't have like a traditional payroll system, whatever, and you want to reward your community, you will need to start using some kind of ways of tracking contributions or directly rewarding people. So you can maybe use something like Coordinate, where people report their contributions and then allocate rewards to each other. Or you can just use like a direct tipping system. Maybe you can start like if you have some money, you can start paying people. But actually, I think it's even better to start with your own token, or maybe not have it from the beginning. But yeah, something we did in metagame, for example, we started with a token that wasn't like, it wasn't tradable at all. It was just a token that wasn't listed on the market or anything. But we just started rewarding people with that. And now there are like tipping bots like Collabland, whatever, we can directly tip people with this token, and then this token like can make them feel like they're a part of the project. And especially if you don't have any money, then this token can be used to bootstrap the community or bootstrap the project. So people get paid in this token, then over time, as the project becomes more valuable and grows, then you can add liquidity to the pool, and these tokens can become tradable. So the people that were reward the tokens in the past can sell them if they want and get actual money for it. And again, most importantly, I keep saying it, so it's really super important to keep asking for feedback and keep talking to people and not be hurt by negative feedback. So it's all any feedback is useful, and keep asking it, keep trying to get it in all kinds of ways, from polling to asking in the group chat to DMing people directly, sending out surveys, like any kind of way for gathering feedback and reiterating and making, like, improving what you're working on. And then a few seasons later, hopefully you by now have a triple digit community. And then this another sentence I haven't finished. So you see these multiple rings. So the very inner circle is the 1 to 10% of the community that are actually active. Then you have a wider ring, that's the people who are in the Telegram group, and the wider ring who are the subscribers, wider ring who are like the Twitter followers, and goes on like that. But yeah, like each of these circles or each of these layers of an onion are super important. They just they each have their own value, and even though people might just be lurking, it's often a matter of time where they randomly activate at some point and start adding value to the project. But the point is that you started with this idea that you honed in on, you got a lot of feedback, you built some kind of an MVP, and by now the meme what started as a meme is a living thing. So this thing that exists in your head and now exists in other people's heads. It exists in the form of a newsletter and Twitter posts, whatever. So it's like a thing. And yeah, so this is again something that a lot of people struggle with, especially the people like who are in the doing good space, and the people who are building non-profits or stuff like that. So they keep building and not asking for anything in return. But then yeah, like at some point people start burning out, and they often only realize that after they burn out. So yeah, it's important that after you realize you have already sunk in countless of hours and built a bunch of things, and you have an engaged community, it's time to start seeing some grants, time to start finding sponsors, maybe turn on the paid memberships, start selling NFTs if you haven't already, or really like finding any other way of making it self-sustainable. So your goal should be, if that's your goal, like if you want to really take this project far, your goal should be to be able to work on this project full time and be paid for working on it. So yeah, you will need money for that first, but also for rewarding the community members. So yeah, definitely need to not be ashamed to ask for money, and yeah, as soon as you think you did something well, start seeing ways to fund it. And probably the best way to really get started, besides like newsletter subscriptions, is on Gitcoin. So keeping an eye on the Gitcoin grant rounds and getting your community members to donate to your project, and then having that matched with the funds from Gitcoin, the big allocators who give into the Gitcoin matching program. So that's super useful. And then going back to the point I made on the very first slide, is that like, yeah, you really don't need a DAO framework to get started. You should by now have a multi-sig maybe, but you should only really start an actual DAO framework once you find the product market fit or community market fit, because otherwise, like, what is there to govern? Like, you can build the most decentralized nothing. So it's just not very useful. And it's also something that I've experienced with like a project that was very early on, and it was calling itself a DAO, and some people were like, yeah, but this should be more decentralized, or this person has too much power. But it's like, power over what. Like it's this project doesn't have any users, isn't making any money. So like, why are we so ideologically driven and trying to make it as decentralized as possible when it's just like no value to be governed? But yeah, so the most important thing is that okay, you don't need a DAO framework, but like as I've already repeated many times, is that the community needs to have input in the development. So like again, constantly asking for feedback, doing user interviews, polling the community and stuff like that. So no need for formal governance, but if your community is involved, then yeah, you're already well on your way to build a DAO. And yeah, so this the governance by committee, which is not a great thing. Like it's very rare that committees build something great, because they like often end up landing on something that's not really great for anybody specific. That's just like nobody has anything against it, which is usually something that nobody really wants. And what was the other point? I forgot. Oh yes, this strong unifying vision. So yeah, like this goes back to like choosing focus, because like if the DAO doesn't have a very clearly laid out vision and mission, like what's the purpose of this DAO, then what ends up happening is that a lot of people join the DAO and start pulling it in other directions. So it becomes harder and harder to really like take it to the community market fit or the product market fit and deliver on the purpose, because it just gets watered down and spread thin. So usually projects at the beginning need this strong unifying vision that is usually held by one person or like 2-3 people at most who like are very aligned. And all of this is not to say that you shouldn't be already looking into what DAO frameworks are out there, what DAO tooling, testing them, reading up on different governance models, and writing how you plan on progressively decentralize the project. Next. Oh, this, I just realized that this went on for way too long. So what we covered is just being realistic, picking a role, the minimum viable meme, building a community, building in public, rewarding your community, having some kind of distribution, not losing momentum, so having the rhythm, and finding sustainability. So yeah, that's that. Read the DAO playbook, please. And then the final slide is just a big thank you for listening to me for so long. I apologize to Chris and Rene. Like yeah, I really planned on doing this for 15 minutes, but here we are a long time later. So thank you all for listening, and we can get into the panel, or if there are any questions before the panel.
Question. I would just like to say that even if I think that this is very obvious, we have missed it, and it's great to have like specific points so that we can follow. And as we are in here in this cohort, so at least for Urbanica, we are committing to follow these steps, and it is a way of yeah, we know we need to do it. Now we are going to do it because we are in this cohort. So thank you for that.
Awesome.
Sorry, sorry, but this is very useful to know these frames. To this is to do this. This is the way to do this, and please don't do this because it's a very trouble.
Yeah. Yeah, this is something that I mentioned in the previous session. Like a lot of these things sound really obvious now, but to people who are like first time founders, they're really not. Like I know that when I first started metagame 4 years ago, like I didn't know most of these things, and now when I was writing them, it's like, oh, these things are so obvious, but they're not to everyone. All right, then I have a question. So what do do you think needs to be added, Chris or Rene? So yeah, we're getting into the panel part of this.
Awesome. So just first of all, I thought that was great, and totally, those are like the lessons learned you get only by doing. I would say here's one thing that so maybe by way of introduction, I am in many DAOs, but two that I have started. One is Purple, which is a Farcaster public goods DAO. Another one is Energy, which is a DAO on Zora Network that supports artists on Zora Network. And I've made some of those mistakes in the doc along the way, but most of the two of those DAOs are thriving right now. The next big challenge that I didn't quite see in there is okay. I actually have 2 points to respond to that doc. Let me start with the simpler one, which is like I agree. Don't start with DAO. Where I think sort of DAOs start to come together is when you have shared funds, and so as soon as you have people like donating money to conquer a mission together, you then kind of need some way to govern that money. Before that, you can be a loose collective or a group of collaborators. But it's sort of like once money comes into that mix, and then you have to distribute that money, you have to in some way govern and do the right thing by the people who gave you that money. And so to me, that is sometimes often the line that gets crossed for me is like, okay, now a bunch of us are going to put $100 in each. How do we decide to spend that $100? And that's when some of the governance stuff starts to come in. But then you're up and you're running and you've followed this playbook. The next like really hard thing is getting other people to take leadership in the DAO. And this is like another little trap you can fall into that I've certainly fallen into, which is like, I'll just even to zoom back. I started with DAO because I had been in many DAOs and they're kind of leaderless. It feels that way at least. And you're like, great, I want to do this mission and I want all these people to help me. And then the reality is strong leadership is required to really make these things go. And so often it's the founder or those first 20 people in your Telegram. Even those first 20 people, maybe 5 of them are leaders. But then you have this small group of leadership. But then it actually becomes very hard to convince every other new member that they are also a leader and that they need to take ownership. And so, certainly I sometimes feel like the trap of Purple is that we do lots of stuff only if I'm motivated. And I've like not done a great job of getting everyone else to take ownership and leadership and feel like they can be, that this is their DAO. And then when I started Energy, which was second after Purple, I like optimized for that because I was feeling the pain of everything about Purple running through me. And that took some time, but now it's actually just the opposite, which is like I almost feel like I can do the Homer Simpson meme and fade into the bushes, and like Energy would keep running. And so it's just sort of it's another one of those things that like feels obvious, and then you jump into it and it's not obvious, and everyone's looking to you, so you start making decisions. Fast forward 6 months down the road, everyone's looking to you for every decision, and like it just shouldn't be that way, right? So just that's one more challenge that's not quite in that deck that I think is to be aware of, which is like maybe your role as a DAO leader is first to galvanize the troops and point point everything in the right direction and get everyone the shared mission. But probably your next and most important thing is to build leaders from within the DAO so that you don't become like the single point of failure.
Well, in this point, this is very tricky to choose what kind of DAO is the most value only for maybe. But it's very tricky because it's not only to do things. So it's mean it's more than this. These DAOists need to be to this uh, enthusiastic, to be very value purpose. I don't know. Maybe these things is very important to choose these people to do this leadership and ownership. I think is the most important way to to to, to sh- to see this. I don't know.
Delegating power and giving people the authority to make decisions, because it's really hard to have people lead things when they feel like they have to consult the community on every single step. And then another important thing is just like having people paid. Like in the early on, it's maybe harder to get people to easier to get people to step up, but as more people, like as it requires more time to actually lead. Like, so one of the traps that I fell into is thinking that DAOs are going to function with purely this sort of like swarm mentality. And this thing that I wrote, which is funny actually, because I read the tweet that was like, tweet the most obvious thing that you think now. And the obvious thing to me was like, when I started, I thought that like, instead of having one person working full time, I can just get like 10 people, 15 people working like 1 hour per day or half an hour per day. And it's going to result in the like same thing, except that we won't need so much money because people can dedicate half an hour for free. But it's like on top of the coordination cost required to coordinate all these people, you just won't get leadership, because like nobody's going to lead a project for half an hour per day. You really need people who are working at least part-time.
Or they have very discrete tasks. If you're gonna just put in a little bit of time and have like any sort of result, it's got to be very, very discrete tasks. Because I saw somebody post on Twitter recently, I just started a company and I've just hired 5 people part-time. Like, some going on and on, but this person has huge social capital. This person has the roles are very discrete, and the expectations of those roles are very, very clear, right? So you can hire somebody part-time to do something like that. But if the roles or the job or the type of leadership needed is more nebulous, it's much harder to dedicate, small amounts of time. And that's where like the architecture of what's the product and who are the kinds of people that we need to push the product forward really comes in to play. Really clear definitions of all of these things are needed.
I agree with all of that, especially like paid positions are really powerful and allows people to dedicate time. For me, often in the other DAOs I participate in, I want a small paid, even if it's like something I would want to volunteer for. And I do volunteer a lot, but often I think it's like the stuff I volunteer for is the last stuff I can do on my to-do list. And sometimes I have free time, and so I'm like an excellent volunteer. But sometimes it's like I have a job, and then I have this other paid gig for another DAO, and that stuff has to get done before. And then it's like I have a family, and I'm trying to like manage all this stuff. And so like any amount of payment, immediately I treat it much more professionally. Like, okay, this is my consulting gig. I have to get that work done. So there's a lot of benefits to that. And then I'll just add that it is hard in the early days when you have no money to be paying people. But we've got into this. Purple is now about 2 years old, and for the first 2 years we essentially didn't pay anyone. Now Purple is a public goods DAO. We mostly give grants. There's not like a lot of overhead. But now when we do want to introduce paid positions, it's like there's a lot of pushback because we have this culture of no one has ever been paid before. And so I would almost try to like even have a small like 0.01 ETH payment or in the early days, so that you just sort of acknowledge that as an organization we're going to reward people for their time and their effort. And then my other kind of thought here, when I started to really come around on this maybe 9 months ago, is often comms is like an unpaid position. And then when I participate in DAOs when there is someone paid to do comms, both internal and external, it like just runs so much better. And a lot of that's like actually internal comms. If someone's job is to wake up and make sure the membership knows what to do, then you wake up as a member and you know what to do. If that's no one's job, you get kind of the couple of tweets a week or a couple of casts a week, and it's a lot harder to know where you participate. So I think, external comms, because you want to proliferate your meme for sure, but then internal comms is super important too, because who's thinking about the messaging that happens to your membership. Well, again, most of them are involved in 10 other things, but they want to participate, but it could be hard to figure out how. Again, as a position I have not successfully convinced Purple that we should be paying for, but it's something I totally believe we should be.
That's something we're struggling with in the DAO that I'm in. X number of meetings a week, but how many people are coming to them? And the momentum has dropped off significantly as time has gone into building the products, some of the architecturing of the actual products, which means there's a lot less time spent out like shilling, like Peeth was saying. So, yeah, for communicators like me, hearing that you should be paid for communicating, even if it's not a technical product, right, is again a no-brainer that often, right, we just assume we're online all the time, so we're going to see things, but we just know it's not true. We just know that that's not true. There's too much to see every day if you don't have somebody dedicated to making sure the message is getting out there in a variety of channels and mediums and timing. And, that's why marketing specialists are specialists.
What you says, I think it's products or services. In the DAO, I was gonna say, we have this problem because the it's very complicated to be how do you say that, be rentable, maybe, uh, to make a DAO rentable or product rentable. It's very complicated because the governance, it's very big monster to control everything, right? And if we need to be more decentralization, the more decentralized to make these decisions in this way, we need to use a lot of tools and a lot of maybe contract social, I don't know, to do this. It's very complicated, but the values, the values of the members, it need to be in the same way to do
Mhm.
that.
Issue that you mentioned before of like paying people or like paying people more than others was a particular problem, like because we started with only coordinate and we had no budget. So what ended up happening is that whenever we had more money, we just got more people making small contributions, and we also had people who were like joining from like third world countries where you need a lot less money, and that ended up like with a situation where the like really high impact contributors were never incentivized enough to remain in the project because like
Mhm.
rewards just started get spreading further and further out. And then at some point we ended up hiring a developer full time for the first time ever, and he was paid as much as the whole community altogether. And this wasn't taken lightly at first, but the community actually ended up accepting. Like we voted on it, and we accepted the fact that like if we don't have a single full-time developer, we're just never gonna get anywhere. Like even if it sounds super unfair that this one person receives as much as 10 other people, like we still have to do it.
I think having that conversation is so critical and a big issue with cost of living differences across the world and salary expectations. In addition to coming in from, for example, a traditional developer space versus coming in from maybe a nonprofit space or a different professional sector or straight out of school or something where your expectations for what you should get paid can vary wildly for a multiple set of reasons. And being able to have an honest open conversation about that is not something I see a lot of people comfortable doing, but I do think it has to be reconciled at some point. And so being able to like have a respectful dialogue around what people should be paid and how often and how much, it's really interesting to see how different communities approach that. We see that in translation, right? Like I can ask for 25 cents a word, or I see some people asking for a penny a word, right? And it's like naturally a contractor is going to want to go with somebody who pays a penny a word, but like, is the quality, you're talking about all these other issues, and you need to make sure that what you're getting for what you're paying, everyone agreed, you're okay with that contract.
Mm. Yeah, there's so many layers to it. Like even if there's a same level of quality, what may end up happening is that the person doesn't have the same leadership quality. So they do this
Right.
one task and then they move on. Whereas if you pay the other person more, they end up sticking around. And
Yeah.
so many layers to this. So I wanted to move on to another question. It's a big reason why I wanted Renee on this panel was that are you still with us? I see you turned off camera. Renee? Oh, there you
Guys,
go. No?
is the repeat the question, please?
I didn't hear anything. Are others hearing him?
Aaron?
He said that if you can repeat the question, please.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so like big part why I wanted to have you on this panel is because you have a lot of experience in marketing. And that's something I really struggled with. And I think a lot of DAOs struggle with. So I would love to hear
Yes. In this way, we have a lot of troubles and experience because in Nation Bankless, I'm in the Bankless DAO and in the Push DAO, and we have a lot of problems with communicate different things to need to do inside of the DAO, but communicate offside of the DAO because uh, with trouble is in what is the better tool or social network to communicate this thing in this in right moment in the Nation Bankless, we try to do a lot on Farcaster in Warpcast. We in this social network we have a lot of community in Latin community to building a different things in Spanish or to Spanish speakers, but in Farcasters too we have a lot of OGs of the crypto, and it's more easy to connect with us and with them in this social network. But in the another favorite social network, it's Twitter. Twitter or X now. We have in this social network a lot of community, and it's more how do you say before Telegram, it's another way to get involved to our community. We have a Telegram group too, and we try to share value around the content we have. In another way, in Nation Bankless too, we have a paragraph newsletter, and this is our best product. This is the truth. This is our best product, and how how we do this in the right way. I think it's the content. The content is the centric of the strategy to do things to explain to make more easy way to the builders, I think. And we have a lot of alphas in the I don't know, maybe in the meme coins and shit coins. uh, we have a lot of topics of this way, and this is, I think this is the or better strategy to do better in this area. I think, I don't know. I try to explain a lot of things we do in these DAOs.
I have a question I'm putting in the chat, but maybe Rene is not looking at it. Uh, yeah. So Rene, have you checked WhatsApp community, like the section? There's not the WhatsApp groups, but the WhatsApp communities. Have you checked that?
Yes, yes. I think this is a very a great way to use if you need to onboard people or only to share. Um, I don't know. I have this word to say that. Let me. It's nugget. It's a if you share a nugget of knowledge. This is a very a good way to do this in this social network. But I don't know. Maybe I think the last things I said, it's more to people to get get involved in Web3. But of the newbies of the onboarding, maybe if we use the another platforms to be complicated, I think this is a good way to do this. But I think the how do you say, um, if the first of all, you need to think what do you need to communicate in, where is the community you looking for. If you take this yes.
Well, I was just going to say, like, my Ukrainian channels are all in one place. Like, my very specific Peruvian channels, like, my Facebook groups about very specific sub communities, like, are still on Facebook. Like, if I want to reach certain people, that's where I have to go. And versus, like, I only, like, my super, like, Web3 people are only on Signal and will not communicate on any other platform. And just like, that's a lot of knowledge you have to either have in your head, or if you want it to be transferable, you've got to document that and it's got to stay up to date. But it's a lot because you have to understand how people communicate and what's easiest for them. Because the easier you make it for them, the more likely they are to continue, like to participate or get involved or stay involved.
Rene.
Then anybody else have any thoughts on it meanwhile?
Yeah, I mean, I just think comms is super hard, so it can't be overstated. With Purple, we had a lot of strong-minded people in the early days, and literally 50% of them wanted to use Discord and refused to use Telegram, and then 50% of them refused to use Discord and only wanted to use Telegram. And so we had like this really broken chat for a while, and then we decided, and it's kind of like Meet You where you're at. Warpcast introduced channels. Actually, Purple was the first channel. It was a very long time ago. They created a channel for us, and then it was like, okay, we're going to shut down everything and just communicate on Farcaster because that's where we all are, because that's what this whole DAO is organized around. Now, that worked great for a while, and then they really went pretty heavy on the algorithm with Warpcast. And now the channel is a pretty broken way to try to communicate because some of the members see it in their feed, some of them don't. And so now, okay, what was the next version of that? And so we're sort of moving towards a separate announcements channel that we're only going to, very few people have posting rights to it, and it's only for the really high impact stuff. And then people can like turn on notifications so they get notified for anything into that channel. And so it's a little bit of like, we were a little bit broken at first. Then we chose a tool that worked for us. Then the tool changed, and now we're like changing our strategy again to accommodate for it. And you just see it when comms is broken. It's like, our quorum is like, I don't know, 70 people, and you get a vote goes up and 10 people vote. You realize that it's like, oh, most people did not even know this was happening, even though this is an important event. Oh, but no one mentioned anything. It's like, oh, but we put it in our channel. And it's like, yeah, but that channel got algorithmed out of your feed. And so, you can really feel it sometimes when communications is not working. And yeah, I have not found the silver bullet here. I will say Energy has a much smaller number of contributors. We have a single channel Telegram group, and it actually works pretty great. But that will fall apart when we reach, the Dunbar number or something, I'm sure.
So I have a question on that note around Colony. So the way I understand Colony to function is that things only go up to a vote basically when there's not consensus at the sub levels below that. So in their case, does anyone know internally how Colony communicates with its people? No? Okay.
Like, I'm interested in this sort of like optimistic proposal system. Like, a proposal passes unless it has, unless it's contentious. But the appointment is great, which is like, okay, but if no one knew it was happening, then who can even dispute it, right?
Right. I do like that about Paragraph, that you can like send things via email. You can there's like 4 or 5 different ways you can like send notifications about your posts. I do find that a useful mechanism, the way they've set it up.
In this in Paragraph,
Team built like the DAO management stuff is a Telegram bot that bridges proposal notifications to Telegram groups, because otherwise like nobody voting ever.
this is a problem the push protocol resolves with notifications. In Paragraph 2, I liked the users can how to say,
They can choose how they want to receive information, right?
yes, they can settings this, and they can so about to your content.
Yeah.
With it. This is a great way to make money, maybe to the DAO, to the funds of the DAO, and use to the pay contributions or pay tools. So, I don't know.
Yeah, and
Sorry, guys.
any attendees, like, feel free to jump in, like if you have any questions about any of these topics, or if you want to share your own experience with starting a DAO. I know on the first session, everybody who came to the first session of DAO Spring, at least in the first group, already started a project, so there was nobody who's like really just came with the idea. If you want to share how you did things, or have any thoughts or questions, whatever, like, feel free to speak.
And while we wait for someone, I just want to tie a few things together that I thought were good in your deck, which is both like just start with a Telegram group. Again, I think tools are tools. You choose the right one for you, but it's like if you can get 20 people interested in the idea, that's probably step one. And then the second part of that is like minimal viable meme, just somewhat related. And when I started Energy, it was literally a tweet that just went like mini viral. And then I said, someone should do this. I was not looking to do it. Someone should do this. And then it's like, then my DMs just got flooded with people looking to participate. And so that was like this minimal viable meme plus the first 20 people. And then I feel like that ties back to your communications channel. And then for energy, it was great because it all just started. Well, it started on Twitter, but then it like quickly moved to Telegram, and then we had a culture of Telegram. I think that's kind of, even if I go back to the payments point, you create a culture around your DAO in the early days, whether you know it or not. And so I think I have not been. I think I'm in 2 DAOs with great cultures, but I was not that intentional around them. But you wind up with like, okay, now we have this culture, no one gets paid. It's very hard to change, right? Or you have this culture of bad communication. And it's so much easier in the beginning when there are 10 people in your DAO, or like when it's very, very small. It's so much harder when there are hundreds of people. Um, and so I think the comp point is important. I think the payments point is important. I think the like starting with a minimal viable group before you even start out is all super important, and it's just like it's also, there's just so much. Starting a DAO is so much more work than I had anticipated. So in some ways, it's like starting a startup, and you're just treading water, and you're just trying to make shit happen. But there's some intentionality that you're like, actually, everyone's watching how this thing operates, and so you're setting the culture.
I think in DAOs, in big DAOs like Optimism or Arbitrum, uh, and I'm more involved in the Arbitrum DAO. I say the best practices. It's we have how do you say that, like sub DAOs, but it's organized in small groups to do specific things. Maybe if you have a big DAO, maybe this is a good way to share the task, or no, I don't know, to do a lot of things in the same uh, time. I don't know. What do you think about this?
Wait, can you restate that?
I'm sorry. Yes,
Yeah.
uh, I says when you says it's more easy to be a small DAO than a big DAO. If we are a small DAO, it's more easy to communicate, and all the persons can choose the task to do to this to do the person need to do. But if you are a big DAO like Arbitrum or Optimism, you have a lot of problems because it's a lot of people do a lot of things and different things. Assess in these big organizations, maybe to do better work. Maybe if you have a subDAOs or subgroups to do specific things and solve specific things, it's more easy to work in this way.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that 100%. I actually like some of my. I was in sort of the early phase of DAOs that many of us were in, and then when I joined Optimism, that was when I just sort of like, oh, this can actually be better. Again, part of it is like, it's like a lot of the themes I'm talking about that came together when I joined Optimism, which is like, oh my god, the communication is so good. I wake up every day, I know what I'm supposed to do, and then I started realizing like, oh, someone's full time job is to make sure that happens. And then like then you could think about that then I realized it's all of Optimism, which is like everyone is paid real full time salaries. They don't have side gigs. It's not a side gig. It's their thing. And so a lot of the stuff runs more smoothly. But then part of that, to your point, is then these people also own some part of the stack, right? It's like it is not built by committee. It's like, hey, you are the retro PGF guy, and whatever, you're responsible for our DeFi activities. And so it doesn't even have to be a huge DAO. I think it's like to empower people and let them kind of own that piece of the puzzle. And and pay them for it. And maybe it's like a 3 month gig, and then at 3 months you can evaluate whether that person is doing a good job or not. That's actually at a stage we're at in Purple. And Purple's like small. Our treasury is like down to 25 ETH. We're a few hundred people, but we realize that like not everything needs to be everyone voting on it. And so how do we break this out into either very small groups or even single individuals? It's like one of the things we do, we fund a lot of meetups, but it's like have 300 people vote on every meetup. It just doesn't make a lot of sense, right? It's like, well, can we just have a meetups subgroup or even a single person who deals with this? And we entrust you with 5 ETH to fund these meetups, but we don't all have to vote on every single meetup. I think that's ultimately kind of the future of these organizations, is like multiple autonomous teams inside a larger sort of autonomous organization.
With one person, it's maybe like 4 people. Then these 4 people turn into 4 teams, and it just slowly scales like that. And then maybe at some point you have sub DAOs or even DAOs that like fully spin out into products or like of their own, like DAOs.
Totally.
This thing where everything was like just the community, and there's no core team, there's no like teams in general. It's all one big community. We do everything together. We vote on too many things, and it just becomes very ineffective, where you have to like get every decision approved by the community, and there's like no incentive for leadership. And people who are actually doing the work become demotivated. We have a lot of people who are there to just like chill, enjoy the vibes, and do some like armchair governance, and it's things start to break down.
Then it also bears mentioning that like DAO is such a big term, and it means so many different things, right? And my sort of specialty is in Namish DAOs. And one of the nice things about Namish DAOs is you grow one member every day, and so you actually do have the time to build the culture, help the people, coach the people. It's different if 10,000 people show up on day one. I think that's I don't think you have to be a Namish DAO, but to start slowly, like I like the notion for proto DAO, which is like I'm involved in Hat's protocol. And this proto DAO, and it's really, I'm in season 2. Season 1 was smaller. Season 2 is really only about 20 people, like figuring out, like doing the DAO stuff amongst 20 of us. And then every season, I think a season lasts 2 or 3 months, we like add more people to it. And like eventually you may just sell the token and have 10,000 members, but at least if you can start slowly and methodically, I think that can help a lot.
I just read the conversation in the chat. Sophie, can you jump in the conversation to talk more about this?
Sure. Well, I'm following the conversation here in the chat because Ian, he's talking about how they have 2 sub DAOs and 5 strategic work streams. And I'm saying that this division of the workflow or the teams is great for building ownership because, well, at least in my experience, I've seen that bigger groups of people, well, it tends to make it difficult to see the tasks clearly or to understand the maybe the responsibilities clearly because there are so many people and maybe so many tasks and you have to divide yourself in like, okay, I will do this half an hour today and then I will do this half an hour later and blah 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 blah, blah. And then ownership slowly fades. So I think making sub DAOs and this group division it's a great strategy.
Quickly add to that, you can all hear me.
When the DAO started doing it, they were like against it. Oh no, it's centralizing power into these people or these teams. But I would argue that like in some ways it's more decentralized because like more people get this autonomy, whereas instead of like having the community as being this one central point, like being the everything happening at command and control of the community. I see Ian, you and
Yeah, I don't know. You can hear me okay, right?
Yeah.
I was just going to add, yeah, all of that's correct. And yeah, it does come out something like a sociocracy, as was said in the chat, exactly. However, it's purposeful. It's purposefully put, as mentioned as well, under more ownership and more control by the council so that we can make sure the KPIs are aligned especially tightly from day one, and we can progressively decentralize over 3 years to full community control of, you know, the entire protocols ecosystem, which is not an easy task. Hence, we need to put more ownership into place from day one, especially when we're trying to eventually become a full protocol DAO.
Definitely. Thank you all for watching. This week's challenge is writing a one-liner. So ideally, you should write the whole single page document outlining the problem that you're trying to solve, how you plan on solving it, and what the minimum viable product is. But most importantly, you should write a single sentence explanation with a focus on the value proposition. So that should sound something like, we do X for people who struggle with Y. Yeah, thank you again for tuning in, and see you in the next session.